Birth is a roller coaster ride.
Sweat's pouring off his face, but he's calm. Stressed out every day. The image of this immediate birth, but it's from the father's perspective, rushing through chaos.
I got a lot of grace coming.
Bringing life through from the dream into reality is creation. Life is a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
You thought it started with you. It's been a long time coming. I give you all my love.
We welcome the process of death, knowing we will be reborn in a state of greater wholeness.
Welcome to the Pink Hearse podcast, episode 1, Mothership. Our special guest today is Molly Mitchell-Hardt, Childbirth Educator and Psychotherapist, who also happens to be my life partner, the love of my life, my wife, and the mother of our beautiful child, Rock. Welcome.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction.
So, to dive right in, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are on your journey?
Where to begin? Maybe I'll start with now and see where I end up. Right now, I kind of always have multiple projects going on, and sort of what is taking up most of my mental, emotional, spiritual real estate is being a mother and having a family, and the kind of intentionality around that in terms of how we're raising our son and, everything that goes into that. And then I have my psychotherapy practice, which, as far as where I'm at with that, my kind of background is in depth psychology, which in a really simple way of putting it is about acknowledging that there's seen and unseen realities, and more of our seen reality is influenced by the unseen than the seen or than the knowable. There's obviously a lot more to that, but that's a simple way of kind of grokking that piece of it. And then my other love is the sacred journey of motherhood, which is a co-collaboration between myself and fellow mama and friend Becky Whitmore. And that's been a real labor of love through my own and her own journeys of, the initiation of motherhood. We created sort of the resource that we both really wish we had in our first pregnancies. And that includes, education, childbirth education, and also guidance through the psycho-spiritual transformation of pregnancy and birth and, becoming a parent. So, yeah, those are sort of the trifecta of if my brain was like split up into a pie, it would probably be, those would be the major slices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've come so far from where you began as a child in Massachusetts, going through so many phases and stages to become the woman you are. How did you stay focused on your truth throughout all of the noise of society, family, and social influence?
That's That's a good question. I would say I didn't always stay true to myself or know what that even meant for a long time, you know. I think most of us, I mean, all of us, because it's sort of what happens developmentally, are first really indoctrinated into the culture and society and collective overculture and collective ego. And then we individuate, hopefully, and really start to discover who we are. And I think that journey started for me, you know, probably in high school. And, you know, more than anything, I think happened out of necessity, because my path is, it's like, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to like stray far from my path because I'll be unwell, you know, I'll have a lot of symptoms and a lot of dis-ease in my body. And so, you know, I couldn't last so long in the kind of matrix that I was kind of marinating in. And so that kind of journey of finding what my deeper truths has, you know, gone on for the last, you know, 15 plus years. And I would say that it's still a struggle to stay true. And that's partially because there's, you know, my identity is kind of wrapped up in partially like a people pleaser archetype. And so having boundaries and saying no and at least outwardly being confrontational has been challenging for me, though I've always kind of held this inner rebellion. So I have sort of like this shield, and my inner world is very much my own. And I'm actually trying to move out of that and be more outwardly expressive around my no and my boundaries, and so that I can really be in my authenticity and not hide. But yeah, I think that's a big challenge, is finding your truth and then having to, on some level, I'm hesitating to say fight for it, but that's what's coming through.
Defend.
Yeah, and just hold it, you know, in the face of other people's input, opinions, ideas, you know. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. It's kind of about giving birth to yourself, is what that feels
many
like.
times over, you know, like you said, going through so many phases, and it's like each phase is a death and rebirth. And, you know, what a gift to go through many deaths and rebirths within one life.
Absolutely. You have helped me evolve in so many ways and continue to do so. One of the most incredible things you do is hold space and show love to all the sides of humanness that arise, especially the darker and more repressed sides. How do you do this? Where did you learn to cultivate that tolerance and respect for discomfort and shadow?
I mean, I think first and foremost, my own experiences with like heartbreak and grief and pain, and kind of letting my heart be broken by the world and by the state of things, really cracked me open in a lot of ways, and gave me an ability to resource compassion from a really deep place. I remember like what's coming through right now is when I was in India, I remember this little girl. She looked really young. I don't know how young she really was because she was just really small. But she was begging with like a tin can, and I could kind of feel. I had been in India for like probably 3 months at that point, and I could kind of feel the choice point of like turning away or turning toward energetically, and I decided to just like fully open myself to her energetically and let myself be broken by what I saw and what I felt. And there's just so much kind of humanity that pours forth in that place. So I would say, just beginning in my own kind of depth of feeling. And then, because I've experienced that in myself, I want to hold that with and for other people. Because that's actually where I'm most comfortable with other people, like relationally, in like a space of really, really deep sharing and truth. Because I think, it makes us all feel less alone when we bring up these parts of us that maybe are scary to bring up, and then they're held with love, and they're normalized, and they're held with care and attunement. It's just so incredibly healing. And, so that's sort of like how my life has shaped that. And then, kind of going back to that depth psychology lens, I find that lens specifically has been so normalizing to me of like all human experience. And, because when you hold things not so literally and really take a metaphorical, mythopoetic lens, you can kind of see the deeper roots of all human behavior on an archetypal level. And it's like, you can see your own part in things, but you can also see how you're sort of an instrument being played. And in a way, how freeing that can be when you can see it objectively and not be so enmeshed with and identified with those archetypes. And I think that frees up some compassion for self. And that leads me to having cultivated a lot of self-compassion for specifically and through specifically inner child work, and really recognizing the younger parts of self that, have been sort of fragmented and fractured off at different points in life, that through my own healing and through the love and guidance of other healers, have been able to kind of get back in contact with and reparent and, meet the needs that weren't met. And, that has just created such a basis of self-compassion. And so I can very easily translate that to others, and see the little ones inside of really anybody, and cultivate compassion for even, the most challenging people to cultivate compassion for. I don't know. I guess, to sum it up, I really feel for the human condition, this ride is all about alchemy, and in that way, transformation, and in that way, rebirthing and dying and rebirthing and dying over and over again. And that can be really intense, confronting, so just having that awareness and holding that and just, kind of holding everybody's being as much as I can. I mean, by no means perfect when it comes to this, especially when I'm activated, or don't have capacity, but, yeah, just holding that space for people is, one of my greatest joys in life, quite frankly.
Beautiful. To you, what is the significance of birth?
Yeah. I mean, there's those layers to that, because there's, the literal physical birth, and that's its own category. And then there's the more metaphysical that I was sort of just mentioning. And so I guess I'll start with physical birth, because I think physical birth coincides with metaphysical birth. The embodied experience of gestating a child and then birthing a child is so potent and intense. And, in this world, we're really lacking rites of passage in the ceremonial form that, we had in the past. I think women are lucky in these embodied rites of passage that, we can't avoid, whether that's menstruation, the onset of menstruation, or, if you choose the route of having a child. And I would say, the route of having a child specifically is just extremely intense and profound space to die, so to speak, and be reborn. And so that's really the lens that I took in my own experience with pregnancy, was really tracking the almost like biological, archetypal experience I was having throughout that period. And in that was a lot of shedding parts of self that I wasn't really going to be able to take forward, and really grieving those parts. And then also all this unknown, not knowing what it would actually be like to be a mother in a real embodied way. And so, those parts didn't fully solidify until it actually happened and birth happened. But, the physical birth really requires us to strip down everything that's non-essential. Even all the things that we thought maybe we needed, like a birthing ball and, the birthing tub and, the hypnobirthing classes or whatever it is. When push comes to shove, we're really asked to bow down, and allow birth to move through us. We're not in control. And I think that's a really beautiful metaphor for, this metaphysical birth that we're talking about, that there are times in our lives where we're really asked, when we're talking about metaphysical birth, we're also talking about metaphysical death. And that's really ego death, these kind of outmoded aspects of self that are either hindering our growth forward, our movement forward in life, or kind of are just not in alignment anymore, not working anymore, that need to be shed. And often, at those thresholds, there will be sort of symptoms that come up. And that's often, around the time when a lot of people will reach out for therapy. And so I really hold the therapeutic container in this space of initiation. This is an initiation, and I'm sort of the holder of that space. And that it takes a lot of courage and dancing with fear in order to allow parts of self to die and move aside in order to rebirth yourself, whether it's as a mother or at a different kind of maybe more expansive inner space. So there's those like kind of interwoven layers of what birth means to me.
Thank you. You gave birth to our son, Rock, 3 years ago. How has being a mother changed your life?
It's like there's such a stark, almost black and white of before and after. Because I personally have changed so much and life has changed so much. And I feel like my entire sort of brain has been rewired, and my priorities in life have been rewired. I guess it really speaks to the transformation of maiden to mother. And in maidenhood, there was just a sense of endless possibility. And that could sometimes be paralyzing and crippling in a lot of ways, but also exciting and fun. And, getting pregnant was sort of this, the initial thing for me was, I don't think I had fully incarnated yet. I didn't think I realized at that point that I wasn't fully committed to life. I kind of always had this like trapdoor kind of thing going on in my psyche. And that was a really kind of challenging moment in my pregnancy of like, oh, okay, now my life isn't about or for just me. That I had to like actually fully plant my feet here on earth. And that was really scary to kind of close that trapdoor and really show up here and commit in a really real way to life. So, I think that was one of the first little mini initiations in that. And, through the pregnancy, I really had to, at least what it seemed like or felt like at the time, which I don't know what it would be like now after, a lot of inner work that I've done, but I felt like I really had to protect myself around like other people's thoughts and fears and projections and opinions about, birth and pregnancy and motherhood, really everything. And so, in a sense that taught me boundaries in a different way. I think now I have a more nuanced, sense of boundaries, but then it was a little bit more physical. Like I just needed to go away and really be in my own experience and really only take in what felt supportive of that. And, how important boundaries are for the birth itself and for motherhood, as you're navigating, all the, giving, I just remember like giving birth, I had this grief around it because it was like, I would have to share our son for the first time. And, up until that point, we just had this, secret, very, unified connection. He was part of me and always with me, never not with me. And so, yeah, having to share him with the world, that was a big step. And also, holding boundaries. I remember what was really important for us was having those first 40 days, that lion period of really recuperating and, low stimuli and really trying to honor that, his nervous system wasn't fully developed and handling the world was, could lead to a lot of overstimulation in his nervous system. So, yeah. And then as far as I'm kind of thinking about like, what shifted as I was pregnant and then with birth, I think with birth itself, after, we had our son at home and you caught him, and I love telling him that story. He loves hearing it. But it made me feel really unstoppable, especially at first. I was like, whoa, I kind of couldn't believe what I was capable of. And then, that was only the beginning, it was like then the next few months of no sleep and nursing around the clock, having these points where I felt like I was just going to completely shatter and be broken down. And then there was like this energy, call it the great mother or whatever. But this sort of energy that wasn't fully mine, that came to meet me in those places that I thought I wouldn't survive. And so I think in addition, motherhood has really shown me kind of a depth of strength and resilience that I wouldn't have ever had access to had it not been for this experience. And then maybe lastly, having a child has put me in touch with my own tenderness and capacity for tenderness. And then being able to kind of relate to him and, kind of see and experience where he's at developmentally at each stage, and knowing that, I was there once, and that sort of bridge to my own inner child work, and recognizing like, ooh, when I attune to him and really meet the need in the moment, that helps me as like a tool to meet my own needs when, the little one or little ones arise at, moments of activation or challenge. And that's been really powerful as far as, using that imaginally to meet my own inner little ones the way that I meet him in times of distress. So I'm really grateful for that. And I'm trying to think if there's so much, like I said, it's almost like night and day.
You'll be a recurring guest, so we can save.
We'll talk more about that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Getting toward the end here, you've spoken to this a bit, but if you had to give advice, or if you were giving advice, what are some ways that you think one can successfully move through the initiation of birth?
Well, I think first and foremost, we all have to move away, run away from what leans in on us from the collective ego and the collective overculture. Because, if we're using physical birth as a metaphor, there's a lot of sort of the hallmark version of that gets pushed on us, like, oh, it's perfect, it has to be perfect. I'm so happy, and what a blessing. And as long as the baby's healthy, which in and of itself isn't bad, but there's also the whole other side of the spectrum and everything in between, that, I think when we move away from the collective overculture, we can get more in touch with our own truth and experience. And so I think, first that, and then the acknowledgement that, with initiation, with threshold experiences comes death, and with any death comes grief. And so there's, I'm a really big fan of the idea of conscious grieving, and, lifting up into awareness any sense of loss, loss of parts of self, loss of identities that we held, even maybe friends and careers, and just these things that we think make up who we are, knowing that we're going to be stripped down. Like that's life is rugged, when you really look at it like that, and lean out of the denial, that I think we have a habit of being in our culture, especially, as we fetishize youth and avoid at all costs, signs of aging or getting older as though they're like the plague. But that I really think if we consciously grieve, these stages along the way, we can actually, like, it's not just grieving for grieving's sake and like staying there. It's actually in service of expansion. And then, on the other side, feeling something else, like feeling joy, celebrating the new identity that you get to step into, and these new capacities that you have that, before walking through that threshold, you didn't have access to, you couldn't, So I think it just reminds me of any sort of underworld experience. That's a really good sort of metaphor for this death and rebirth cycle. Is anytime, you have an experience of like the dark night of the soul, really remembering that you're actually in a cycle, like you won't be there forever, even though oftentimes when we're in that experience, it does feel like there's no way out. But remembering that the alchemical transformational process is encoded in our psyches and our beings. And you are likely at one stage of that process, and it's necessary and it's functional. Our culture sort of manically defends against depression and kind of going down and in. And yet, our depth and archetypal roots are begging us to go there, because that's where we get the boon, where we get sort of new access to new power and aspects of self that, again, otherwise are not accessible. And trusting too, there's a trust in the process that sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. Often it gets worse before it gets better. And that's all not to say though, that there's also an important sort of nervous system component, and really, learning how to work with your own nervous system. And that's sort of its own conversation. I think I'm more in the lane of depth right now. So I think I'll stay there.
Well, we'll continue with that in a future episode.
Yeah.
But just to clarify that, are you saying that an idea that I think you're saying, which speaks to me a lot, is that it's the idea of a monkey trying to rescue the fish, by putting it in a tree to save it from drowning, and then of course kills the fish, that one size does not fit all, and everyone needs to kind of come into realization and awareness of what works for them. And that is that kind of what you're saying, that there's not one
I think
kind
that
of blanket advice for anyone.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think that it's a yes and. Like, as far as the nervous system, it's definitely not one size fits all, you know, especially if you've experienced trauma. The more significant the trauma, the more, you know, you're really going to need to work with the nervous system and in a really sort of personalized way. And the archetypal thread is shared throughout cross cultures, you know, throughout humanity, in that there is a patterned experience of transformation that, you know, we are all always going through, whether we're, you know, conscious of it or not, whether we're in denial of it or not, whether we're holding on for dear life, you know, to stop it from happening or not. Like, it's happening, you know. And the more we, you know, if we can really own that and know it, then we can actually like not literalize things. So the more you can psychologize, so recognize that there's an inner process of transformation that's happening, that's asking something of you, that, you know, the less you'll have to literalize. So, you know, I'd say the maybe most extreme, most stark example of that is like if somebody's experiencing a lot of like suicidality or suicidal ideation, that's such a concretization of the inner death that's being called for, you know? And if we can psychologize it, we can just die in an ego sense and not in a physical sense. But if we literalize it, then, you know, that's suicide. That's dying by suicide. So obviously that's like a really intense example, but that's sort of an example for anything, you know, transformation wise that might be happening, you know. So in a way, it's, you know, if I were to say too, it's like tending to the unconscious, I think, is really important, you know, as far as helping psychologize these things. And that could be through the soma, through, you know, nervous system work. That could be through movement and dance. That could be through dream work. That could be through, you know, imaginal visualization work. So many different modes to access the unconscious. But, you know, the unconscious is sort of like the deeper psyche, you know, and it's really what motivates us and what our behavior is really rooted in. And so when we have a relationship with the unconscious has a relationship with us, you know. And so if we have a really loving and, you know, intimate relationship with the unconscious, it's going to really serve us up some beautiful stuff, you know. But if we have a sort of negating relationship with the unconscious, things are going to be more concretized. You know, things are going to have to be put in our faces a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, to close here, is there anything else you would like to add? And can you tell us a bit more about your work as a therapist and as co-creator of the Sacred Journey of Motherhood, ways that people can learn more about you, support you, experience some of your offerings?
Yes. Well, if anyone, you know, wants to begin that journey of inner work and, you know, kind of embark on that, there's the lane of psychotherapy, my psychotherapy practice. You know, again, like my kind of two big buckets are the somatic therapy bucket and the depth psychology bucket. And I'm really really love how over time I've been able to interweave those things, and it's just been really profound in my work with people, especially bringing in the somatic component as an access point to the unconscious, and how much just like it's sometimes the transformation can just be like hot and fast, it's like, and at the same time, like the work is actually really slow, but it's just a lot happens, because we often don't include the body, in talk therapy. So I've really moved my practice away from just talk therapy to include the body. And yeah, that's been really transformational. So that's like a connection point. I have a Instagram called @YourSoulRising that, has some stuff on there that's nice. And then, if you are wanting to conceive, already pregnant or already a mother, there's, the connection point of the Sacred Journey of Motherhood. And you can find us at the Sacred Journey of Motherhood on Instagram. And we do one-on-one work. And we also have an online course that guides you through each of the 4 trimesters with meditations and yoga nidras and yoga classes and education, childbirth education, different herbs to take. And, so it's really a very full, very informational course. And, we really want to move into more live group work. So we're really trying to build out our newsletter so that really we're building out our community. That's ultimately what we want to create, is a thriving community of mothers that feel supported, on the community level and also on a nervous system level. I think those are, and then, I have 3 accounts. My other account is at Molly Mitchell-Hardt. And that's sort of an amalgamation of everything. So yeah, those are kind of the ways to connect. And yeah, you can sign up for the newsletter through our Instagram. There's a link tree you can drop down.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure.
For taking the leap as guest number 1. Can't wait to keep having you on here.
Yeah, me too.
And I love you.
I love you too.
See you soon, y'all. Thanks for listening.